Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are decoding the logic of real estate. We've got a Python script right here that uses machine learning to predict housing prices.
Yeah.
And our mission is to break it down step by step to really see how a computer learns to value a home.
It's a really fascinating exercise, It just strips away all the emotion of buying a house and looks at the pure math.
Exactly.
We're going to trace the flow from this raw, kind of messy data all the way to a functioning prediction engine.
And what I love about this script is how concise it is. It's not some mysterious black box. You can actually see the gears turning.
Right.
So let's start where every good coding project starts. The toolkit. The import's in the very top of the file.
Yep. Before you build the house, you have to open the toolbox. And what we see here as well, it's the standard data science stack.
We've got pandas and NumPy first. I always think of pandas as like Excel on steroids.
That's a pretty fair comparison. Pandas is what lets Python see the data as, rows and columns of data frame.
Without it, it's just a mess.
It's just a stream of bytes. Pandas gives it structure. And NumPy, that's the calculator. It's handling all the low-level math that has to happen super fast.
Then comes the heavy artillery. Sclearn or scikit-learn. This is where the intelligence lives, right?
Exactly. Pandas holds the data. Sclearn learns from it. We can see imports for random forest regressor, train to split, and a whole bunch of metrics.
Okay.
And that tells us right away that we're not just exploring the data, we're building a supervised regression model.
Supervised, meaning we're going to give it the answer key to study from first.
Precisely.
Okay, tools ready. Step one is loading the data set. The script pulls a CSV file directly from a GitHub repository. It's the California Housing Dataset. And once pd.readcsv does its thing, we get our first look at the raw material.
And this is always the moment of truth. You can have the best algorithm in the world, but if your data is garbage, your model is garbage.
Garbage in, garbage out. So let's look at what we've got. We have geographic data, latitude and longitude. We have structural details like total rooms and total bedrooms, and then some demographic info.
Yeah.
Population, households, median income.
And that median income column is often, it's usually the strongest predictor in these kinds of data sets. Wealthy neighborhoods tend to have expensive houses.
Simple economics.
Yeah.
And finally, we have our target, median house value. This is the thing we want the machine to guess. But there's one column here that it sticks out like a sore thumb. Ocean proximity.
Yes.
The outlier. Everything else is a number. Latitude is a number. Rooms are numbers. But ocean proximity has text. It has values like near bay or 1H ocean.
And that's a massive problem for a machine. You can't multiply near bay by 5.
Right.
Any kind of math equation needs numbers. So we know just by looking at that one column, we've got some serious translation work to do.
Before we even get to that, though, the script runs data.describe. This is that quick statistical summary, and this is where the detective work begins. Did you catch the discrepancy in the counts?
I did. This is like the first sanity check every data scientist does. If you look at that count row, almost every column has 20,640 entries.
Right, 20,640 districts.
But total bedrooms.
Total bedrooms only has 20,433.
So we're missing about 207 entries.
Somewhere in California, there are 207 districts where someone just forgot to write down the bedroom count.
Right.
Or the data got corrupted.
Right. And this is critical because a model is just a giant math equation. If you try to feed a blank into an equation, the whole thing just crashes.
It's like asking a calculator to add 5 plus nothing.
Exactly. It returns an error. So before we can train anything, we have to handle those missing values.
Which moves us right into step 2, data pre-processing, the cleanup phase. And the script uses a very specific command here, data.drop-knock-place, the nuclear option.
And it sounds aggressive, drop NA.
It's just deleting those rows completely, isn't it?
It is. It's basically saying, if you don't have a bedroom count, you're dead to me.
Is that wise, though? I mean, we're just throwing away data. Couldn't we fill in the blanks, maybe take the average number of bedrooms for the whole state and just plug it in?
We absolutely could. That's a technique called imputation. You fill the holes with the mean or the median.
Okay.
And in a small data set, that's usually what you want to do because data is gold. You don't want to just throw it away.
But here, the script chose to delete them. Why?
I think in this case, the logic is about purity. We have over 20,000 rows. Losing 200 is only about 1% of the data.
So it's not a huge loss.
It's not. And the trade-off is that by dropping them, we ensure every single data point left is 100% real, observed data, not a guess we made up. It stabilizes the model, just at the cost of a little volume.
Okay, that makes sense. Prioritize quality over quantity since we have plenty of quantity.
Exactly.
So now we have to circle back to that ocean proximity problem. The text column. The script handles this with pd.getDummies.
This is one of my favorite concepts. It's so simple but so clever. It's called one-hot encoding.
Sounds like a spy technique.
It does, doesn't it? But really, it's just a translation service. The machine can't understand the category near ocean.
Right.
So getDummies takes that one column and just explodes it into multiple new columns.
So instead of one column saying near ocean, we get a new column called, like, is near ocean. That's just filled with ones and zeros.
That's it exactly. You turn the text into a switch. Is it near the ocean? 1 for yes, 0 for no. Is it inland? 1 for yes, 0 for no. Now it's binary. Now the machine can do math on it.
I noticed a specific parameter in the script, though. Drop first. True. That seems oddly specific. Why drop the first column you just made?
That's an optimization to avoid redundancy. Statisticians call it the dummy variable trap.
The dummy variable trap. Okay, break that down for me.
Yeah, imagine you have a light switch. It can be on or off. If I tell you it's not on, do I also need to tell you it's off?
No, that's implied. If it's not on, it has to be off.
Exactly. The information is redundant. So if we have, say, 5 possible locations for a house, and we know it is not in the first 4.
It has to be in the 5th one.
Precisely. So we drop the first column because it's mathematically redundant. Keeping it would actually confuse the model because the columns would be perfectly correlated.
So it's just more efficient, a cleaner data set.
A cleaner, leaner data set for the algorithm.
Yeah. Okay, so our data is clean, no missing values, and it's fully numerical, no text. Now we define our variables. The script defines X and Y.
Question and the answer.
Right. Y is the median house value. That's our target. X is everything else, the latitude, the rooms, those new dummy variables. We're basically stripping the price tag off the house and handing the description to the machine.
And then comes probably the most philosophical line of code in the whole script, print is split.
Philosophical.
I think so, because it separates memorization from learning. The script splits the data, 80% for training, 20% for testing.
We've talked about this before. It's that final exam concept, right?
It is. If you show a student the exam questions and the answers before the test, they'll get a perfect score.
Sure.
But did they actually learn the material or did they just memorize the answers?
They just memorized. They didn't learn the logic behind it.
Exactly. And a machine learning model is the same. It is very, very good at cheating.
So if we gave it all the houses to learn from and then asked it to predict the price of one of those same houses, it would just look it up.
It would just look it up in its memory. It wouldn't predict. It would just recall.
So we hide 20% of the data, we put it in a vault, and the model never gets to see it during that learning phase.
Correct. That 20% the test set is the only way we can know if the model can generalize to new, unseen houses. It's the only way to really trust the results.
And I have to point out the random state 42 parameter here.
The answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Aside from the pop culture reference, it does have a real scientific purpose, right?
It does. It's all about reproducibility. In science, if I can't replicate your experiment, it's not really valid. By setting the seed of the random number generator to 42, we make sure that every single time we run this code, it splits the data in the exact same way.
So if you run it on your laptop and I run it on mine, we get the exact same random shuffle.
The exact same shuffle.
Okay, the classroom is set, the data is prepped. Step 3, the engine. We initialize the model. RF model, random forest regressor. Why a random forest? Why not just a simple straight line?
Well, a linear model assumes the world is simple, that if you add a bedroom, the price goes up by a fixed amount forever.
But the real world is messy. It's nonlinear.
Exactly. A random forest is built on something called decision trees.
Like a flowchart.
Exactly like a flowchart. It asks a series of questions. Is the income high? Yes.
Oh.
Is the house near the ocean? No. Is it old? Yes. And it follows a path down to a price. But a single tree can be wrong. It can get biased.
It can get fixated on one little detail.
Right. So a random forest builds hundreds of these trees. It asks all of them to make a prediction, and then it just averages their results.
It's the wisdom of the crowd.
That's the perfect way to put it. If you ask one person to guess how many jelly beans are in a jar, they'll probably be wrong. If you ask 1,000 people and average their guesses,
you'll be scarily close to the truth.
You'll be scarily close. The random forest is that crowd of 1,000 people, but for math.
And then the command that does all the heavy lifting, rf model.fit xtrain X-train.
The training loop. This is where the computer actually burns electricity. It's looking at that 80% of the data we gave it, trying to find all the patterns, is adjusting the branches of those hundreds of trees over and over to minimize the error. It's learning what makes a house expensive.
And once that finishes, the model is trained. It thinks it knows real estate. So now we have to prove it. Step 4. The report card. We run ipred equals rfmodel.predict xtest.
We unlock the vault. We take that hidden 20% of data, strip off the real prices, and feed the descriptions to our random forest. We say, okay, smart guy, you've never seen these before. What are they worth?
And then we compare its guesses to the actual prices. The script prints out 4 different grades, and I want to go through these carefully because this is how we know if the model is actually useful.
Let's do it.
First up, MAE, mean absolute error. The result is about 31,517.
Okay, this is the wallet check. It's the most intuitive number. It means, on average, the model's guess is off by about $31,500.
Is that good?
In the context of California real estate, it's decent. If a house is $500,000, being off by $30K is sort of a negotiation buffer. It's not perfect, but it gets you in the right neighborhood.
Then we get the second metric, MSE, means squared error. And this number it's terrifyingly large. Over 2.3 billion.
Wait, don't let the billions scare you. This metric is designed to be harsh. It takes every error and it squares it.
Why square it? Why make the number so much bigger?
To punish the really big mistakes. If the model is off by $10, squaring it doesn't do much. But if the model predicts $1 million mansion is worth $100,000, that is a catastrophic failure.
Right.
Squaring that error makes it massive. It screams at the data scientist, hey, you have some serious outliers here. It forces you to focus on fixing those huge misses.
Got it. It's the strict teacher. Next up is MAPE, mean absolute percentage error. The script calculates this one manually, and it comes out to 17.2%.
I like MAP because it scales things. A $30K error on a cheap house is a disaster. A $30K error on a multi-million-dollar estate is a rounding error.
Good point.
MAPE tells us that relative to the price of the house, the model is off by about 17%.
So it's roughly 83% accurate in terms of just the price magnitude.
Roughly, yeah. It gives you a sense of reliability across the board, no matter if the house is cheap or expensive.
And finally, the R-score. R-squared, we got 0.8273.
This is the academic grade. It represents explain variance.
Explain variance for us.
Sure. Why do house prices vary? Why isn't every house the same price? That spread in prices is the variance. And R-squared of 0.82 means that our model, just using location, rooms, income, can explain 82.7% of the reasons why prices differ.
That seems remarkably high.
It is. Think about how irrational the housing market can be. People overpay because they like the paint color or because their grandma lives nearby.
Human factors.
Human factors. The machine can't see paint color. It can't see grandma. And yet it captured almost 83% of the price movement just from the raw stats.
That implies that real estate is maybe a lot more logical and formulaic than we like to admit.
Or at least that the human element is maybe smaller than we think.
So let's just recap the full journey. We loaded raw data, found a data integrity issue with the bedrooms, and we fixed it. We translated text into binary switches so the math would work. We split the data to make sure we weren't just memorizing answers. We trained this complex forest of algorithms, and we verified that it works with about a 17% error margin.
That is the data science lifecycle in a nutshell. And what's cool is that the script is modular. You could swap out this housing data for stock market data or medical records, and the logic flow, clean, split, train, evaluate it would stay almost exactly the same.
It's a universal recipe for prediction.
It really is.
But I can't stop thinking about that 17% error, the gap, that 18% of variance that we didn't explain.
That's always the most interesting part.
We fed it rooms, bedrooms, location, income. What did we miss?
We miss all the things that aren't in the spreadsheet.
Exactly. This CSV file, it didn't have a column for school district rating. It didn't have a column for crime rate. It didn't have a column for view of the mountains versus view of a dumpster.
Or does the house smell like cat pee?
Right. The machine can only learn from what it can see. And that leads us to our final thought for today. We build a model that's 82% accurate with just basic public data. If you were a data scientist trying to close that gap to get to 90% or 95%, what data would you go hunt for?
What is that invisible variable that actually drives value?
That's something to mull over. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Thanks for listening.